Surprised my sister by playing piano at her wedding. Now she's furious I didn't buy her the necklace she wanted. I've been playing the piano since I was 5 years old, and now, at 24, it's not just my passion, it's become my way of life. I also play flute in my city's orchestra, but the piano is where my soul lives. It's funny, in a painful sort of way, that even after all these years, I still can't express myself except through music. My family never supported my love for it. By the time I turned 16, my parents were so frustrated with my playing that they absolutely refused to pay for my piano lessons. They wanted me to quit altogether. But I couldn't give it up. I found a job instead, spending every penny I made on my dream, fighting for every note and performance until I became a professional pianist with a flute as my side passion. My older sister, she's 28 now, went down another road. She studies law, and unsurprisingly, she's always been the golden child. My parents hand her all the attention, and when we all lived together, they actually blamed me for her not graduating yet. In their eyes, I was a constant distraction with my playing. If only I was quieter, they reasoned, maybe she'd be a lawyer by now. When they told me that, I just stopped playing at home altogether. I found places to practice away 4 hours at a time. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore and moved out. A week ago, my sister got married. I wish I could say it brought us closer, but money is tight for me. My rent and daily expenses barely leave me with enough to get by, let alone buy fancy gifts. When I confessed to my parents I couldn't afford a present, I felt physically ill with shame. Their response stung like an old wound tearing open. Next time you'll think twice about your career, they sneered. But my sister and I, at least, I thought we had this special connection through music. I remembered how she used to love falling asleep to the sound of Nocturne No. 6 in G minor by Chopin, how she'd come and talk to me about her crush who was now her husband while I played it for her. So I poured my heart into rehearsing that piece for her wedding, believing that giving her something meaningful from the both of us would be the best gift possible. During the reception, I pulled her aside and told her I had a surprise, something from my heart, something only she and I would understand. I sat down and played. For a moment, as the room hushed and all eyes turned, I thought I'd done something beautiful, something unforgettable. Afterward, I hugged her, convinced for just a second that our connection was real. It was only the next day that reality crashed in. She messaged me saying she wanted to cut me off, furious that not only did I not get her the necklace she'd been hinting for, but that I had the nerve to perform at her wedding without even asking. Reading those words made me feel like I was the lowest person alive, like my attempt at meaning and love had been nothing but selfish disrespect. My parents took her side, of course, telling me that if I don't walk away from music and my talent-obsessed personality, they are done with me too. My heart is shattered. I can't help but wonder if I really am the problem, if maybe, just maybe, I am the one who is in the wrong. They weren't just angry that I played, they made it clear they were furious that I hadn't bought a physical gift, like an expensive necklace, instead. Apparently, being a so-called starving artist who gets the gift of music rather than an item is just embarrassing to my parents and my sister. I really did just fail to read the room. I never meant for things to go badly. I wanted to do something thoughtful from the heart for my sister. I wish things had turned out differently. Update 2. In my family, everyone is either a lawyer, a doctor or vet, or an engineer. That's just the way things have always been, and it feels like there's a mold I've never quite fit into. I'm not that annoying relative who plays music non-stop at family events either. In fact, I'm usually only asked to play at really special occasions like my sister's birthday parties or her wedding, because she specifically wanted it. My sister has always been on my side about my career. She's never acted like she hated it, she genuinely loved when I played for her. I never played to prove anything or to make some sort of point, it was always just a heartfelt gift, something personal from me to her. After receiving lots of different opinions about what had happened between us, I decided I needed to reach out and clear things up. First, I called my parents to see if we could all talk together, me, them, my sister, and my brother-in-law. Immediately, they shut that down. They told me it would be awkward, and they had no interest in a group discussion. When I tried calling my sister, I realized she'd probably blocked me, so I called my brother-in-law instead. He was totally out of the loop and seemed really shocked when I explained what had happened. I didn't mention the details like the necklace or anything too specific because I didn't want to create any more trouble. I just wanted her to know I was sorry and that I wished I'd talked things over with her first. My brother-in-law actually invited me over to their place. As soon as I got there, I completely lost it. I was crying like a baby. My sister, though, just looked at me with this emotionless expression, like I was a complete stranger to her. It hurt. I told her how sorry I was, and that I should have talked with her before doing anything. She then asked my brother-in-law to leave the room, and when she spoke, she was brutally honest with me. What really bothered her wasn't what I imagined. She felt embarrassed because her best friends had given her all these cool gifts, and then her own sister gave her something she can't even touch. That's what embarrassed her most. She said she didn't want to cut me off, for which I'm grateful, and that she gets that my finances aren't in great shape. But she made it clear that she won't help me deal with our parents anymore. Hearing that she wasn't going to cut me out of her life completely brought me a tiny bit of relief, even if things are different between us now. I wanted to also visit my parents, but they insisted on talking on the phone first. The conversation was blunt. They wanted to know what my decision was about my career. I told them straight out that I'm never going to throw away almost 20 years of hard work just so I could go to university and study law, like my sister. That's always been their dream, to have 2 lawyers in the family. That's when things got ugly. They demanded I give them the piano back. It's a grand piano they bought when they got married. Just as a decoration, it sat untouched for years, and I was the only one who ever played it. When I moved out, I asked if I could take it with me, and they agreed. There was never any mention that it wasn't a gift, or that I'd have to return it someday. This broke me. I was so emotional when I tried to explain how much the piano means to me. I've studied on the piano, I love it, and honestly I can't afford to buy another one right now. I pleaded with them to think about it, but they just told me to toughen up and drop it. If I refused to return the piano, they threatened to sue me. Maybe they can, maybe they can't, but I'm scared, and I don't want to find out the hard way. So I'm probably going to give it back, and after that, I'll cut them off completely. My father even told me, "You're struggling financially and still you won't listen to us." Insane. Hearing that, I realized I'd had enough. I told them I need to be alone for a while, and that I want no contact until further notice. Update. Free. 2 mornings after I told my parents I needed space, I woke up to my doorbell going off like an alarm. It was barely 7. I was still in pajamas, my hair in a knot, my eyes gritty from a night of not sleeping. Through the peephole, I saw my father, 2 men in matching polo shirts, and the back end of a rental truck double parked like a thread. My stomach lurched. I opened the door a crack and he went straight into that tone he uses when he's certain he's right. Loud, clipped. Like his words could cut the hinges from my door. "We're here for the piano." I don't think my brain caught up to my body. I just closed the chain and said, as evenly as I could, "No. You can't come in." The men in polos were already glancing over my shoulder like shoppers. My father tried to wedge his foot in. It hit the chain so hard the metal jolted, and so did my whole body. I called my landlord while he phoned the police. The men quieted down when my upstairs neighbor leaned over the railing and started filming them with her phone. When the officers finally arrived, they told my father what I'd read in late night panic Google anyway: civil matter. No one was going to force my chain off for a piece of furniture. He ranted about receipts and that the piano was an heirloom, that I'd stolen it, and I just stood there shaking with my phone open to a 2-year-old text from my mother that read, in black and white, "Take the piano when you move. It'll finally see some use with you." I will never forget the way one of the officers raised his eyebrows at that and said, "Sir, you need to handle this in court if you believe you own it. You can't just take things from someone's apartment." They left after that, boiling with anger that had nowhere to land. The stairwell echoed with a heavy thump of their work boots. When the last footfall died, I slid down the inside of my door and cried hard enough that my cheeks hurt. I had slept on the floor next to that piano the night before, like a child with a favorite toy. It's funny what you do when you're afraid of losing the only thing that makes you feel like yourself. That afternoon, there was a knock, quieter, almost apologetic. An older man introduced himself as Merrick from Threeb, hands up like he was approaching a skittish bird. "I tuned pianos for 40 years, he said in an accent that softened his words, and I heard all that. Do you mind if I look at it? Just to check the humidity hasn't done something funny." I would have said yes to anyone who didn't want to shove my door open with a boot. He came in, touched the wood like you touch a shoulder you haven't seen in a while, and popped the fallboard gently. He didn't ask, "Do you play, or is this yours, or what on earth was that?" He just pulled a tuning hammer out of a cloth roll like a magician finding flowers in a hat and adjusted a key that stuck in winter and spring both. He listened with his ear, not to me, but to it. When I played a scale, quietly, he smiled a little and said, "Ah. She has good bones." We talked while he worked. He told me how his wife had been a ballet teacher, how he used to sit in empty studios while she shouted counts over a scratchy CE player. He spoke like music was a person who'd visited his home for coffee many times. Before he left, he asked if I needed a place to practice that wasn't at risk of being wheeled onto a truck. It turned out the community center 3 blocks away where his wife had taught kept an old Bechstein in a side room. a survivor from a 1980s fundraiser that had outlasted a dozen administrators. He scribbled the director's number on a receipt from his pocket and pointed at it like it was a map. "Oh," he said. "Tell her Merrick sent you." I called as soon as the elevator door swallowed him. The director told me in the same breath that they didn't usually give out keys to non-members and that Merrick had fixed a broken damper there for free every month for 5 years. By evening, I was standing in a small room with blue tape on the scuffed floor and a piano that wore its history openly. The lid creaked. A moth flew up when I opened it. But when I laid my hands on the keys, it was like sitting across from an old auntie who didn't put on airs. I played one phrase of Chopin and the building hummed under my feet. On my way out, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was the events manager from the wedding venue. She was careful, polite, her voice wrapped in professionalism. "This is a bit awkward," she said, "but our sound tech records ambient audio at the end of the night to test the room for the next day, and we have a clean recording of your piece. It was beautiful. Our regular cocktail pianist just broke his wrist, and we have 3 Thursdays we suddenly need covered. Would you be open to filling in?" For a second, I actually looked around the empty sidewalk, like it might be a prank where cameras leap out of bushes. I said yes before she finished telling me the rate. It's not a grand stage, it's hands and keys and people in suits clinking glasses and me, in a corner, being the heartbeat that nobody stares at for more than a minute, which is fine because that's where I'm happiest. I bought groceries on the way home and for the first time in a while, I didn't calculate every apple. The next day, my brother-in-law called. He didn't waste time with the weather. "Your parents showed up with a truck?" he said, and I could hear his voice aim for calm. He told me he'd spoken to a friend at his firm who handles property disputes. "Just talk to her," he said. "No pressure. She'll tell you what's real, not what your dad shouts." I went to that appointment at lunch, hard hammering, armed with my text and the invoice from the movers when I took the piano out of my parents' house 2 years ago. The lawyer was around my sister's age, hair in a bun that was losing the fight, sleeves rolled up. She explained, without sugar, that a gift is a gift when there's intent to give, delivery, and acceptance. "It doesn't have to be wrapped in a bow or notarized," she said, "but keep that text like it's made of glass. And if they try to take it again, call me. If they step into your apartment without permission, it's trespass. If they take it, it's conversion. We can send a letter." An hour after I left, my father texted me a photo of a stapled receipt from a music store circa 1990-something with paid in full circled like a halo. I sent him, with hands shaking so hard my thumbs hit the wrong letters, a scan of my mother's "Take the Piano When You Move." He didn't reply. The lawyer's letter went out that afternoon. I slept that night with a chain on and my ear next to wood that doesn't talk back but understands everything. There was a second knock at midnight that had no business being gentle. It was my sister. She stood in the hallway in leggings and an oversized sweater, mascara already smudged. Behind her, the building was silent in that way old buildings get late at night, like they're holding their breath. "I can only stay a minute," she said as if we had an appointment we were both late for. She didn't come in at first. She looked at the piano, then at me, then down. "I'm not here to fight," she added quickly. I brought you something." She pulled a manila envelope from her tote like it weighed 5 pounds. Inside was a signed statement that the piano was a gift to me on the date I moved, with her signature as a witness and a copy of the moving invoice I hadn't realized she kept. There was also a crisp sheet from a notary with a seal that caught the light. I stared at it too hard and everything went blurry. "I don't want to make this worse," she said in a rush. "But I heard what Dad did this morning, and that's..." She stopped herself. "I'm not in the middle. I can't be. But this is the truth." Her voice softened. "You told me once that gifts you play can be more real than gifts you wear. I'm still trying to unlearn how we were raised. I don't know what she expected me to do. I think she thought I was going to argue with her, or refuse the paper like it was a trap. Instead, I did the thing I've done since I was 5 when words fail, I pointed at the bench. She hesitated exactly 1 heartbeat and then sat beside me, our knees touching like we were 14 again in pajamas on the floor. I played the opening to the nocturne so quietly the strings barely woke, so it felt like someone whispering 2 rooms over. She cried in a way that made no sound. When I was done, she wiped her face on her sleeve and laughed once, "Brill. I told my friend I got a necklace and I don't even like it," she said, like a confession no priest would know what to do with. Before she left, she put a small velvet box on my bookshelf without looking at it. "I asked for it because they told me to," she said. "I wore it because I thought people would think I was something. I don't think I know what that is." She squeezed my hand and then she was gone as fast as she'd come, her steps light and quick like she was sneaking out in reverse. The world, for a second, tilted toward me. The next afternoon, Merrick knocked again with no apology in his knock, which already felt like a gift. He walked in with a dolly that had seen more winters than I have and said, to the room at large, "I hate to see a piano not played." He told me the truth he'd buried under that first visit. His wife had died 3 years ago. He was moving into an apartment with an elevator too small for a piano and a policy too strict for music after 9. He had a baby grand in a storage locker in Red Hook that no one had touched but him and a man with a bow tie who owned a truck. He couldn't keep paying for a locker. He didn't want to sell it to someone who'd use it as a plant stand. "I don't want to give it, not with papers. I can't." He gestured with both hands, words a step behind. "But I want it to live. Would you take it, as a loan? As a friend? I can make a key for you. I can make 2. I couldn't promise him anything beyond care. I told him I couldn't fit 2 pianos in my apartment and he laughed so hard he had to sit down. We decided, because life is both cruel and kind, to put his baby grand in the ballet studio instead and to let any kid with a blister and a dream breathe on it. He gripped my shoulder like old sailors must do when they send each other down to the sea. I didn't say thank you big enough to fit what he'd done. That night I played my first Thursday at the venue. I wore a black dress that had only ever seen funerals and let it pretend it was meant for this. I tucked myself near the bar and patched the hole in the room with sound. People clapped when they noticed, then went back to their conversations. One woman set her drink down mid-sip, closed her eyes through a whole page, and opened them with a smile like a secret. I don't know her. I won't see her again. That is its own kind of perfect. On my way home, my father finally answered with a message so clipped it felt like it had been written with his teeth clenched. "We'll see you in court." 2 minutes later, another. "Return the piano by Monday or we will proceed." I placed my hand, flat, on the lid of mine and the wood came up warm from the day. Fear is a thing that sits beside you and breathes when you do. It is not going to leave just because I tell it to. But for the first time, I have more in the room than fear. I have paper with a seal, a lawyer who doesn't share my last name, a man on the 3rd floor who believes that instruments shouldn't be held hostage by grief, a side room with blue tape and a Bechstein with opinions, a Thursday night gig where I get to be invisible and essential at once, and a sister who showed up in the hall at midnight holding a truth she couldn't carry alone anymore. If they sue me, I'll show up. I will wear something that isn't black and I will not apologize for the life I built in a home that didn't want it in the blueprint. I am not giving the piano back. Not because it's expensive, or old, or because winning would feel like a parade, but because when I sit down and press a key, it is the only time in my life that I don't feel like I have to ask permission to exist. Update 4. 3 days after the "see you in court" text, a man in a blazer that didn't quite fit and a face like an apologetic walrus buzzed my intercom at 9 in the morning. His knuckles were already up when I opened the downstairs door, like he'd practiced a dozen times on the way over. He didn't look at my face when he handed me the envelope, he looked at the address, as if double-checking he hadn't just handed a grenade to the wrong person. "You've been served," he said, syllables heavy with coffee. My name looked colder type than it ever has written in crayon, on a lunchbox. Claim and delivery replevin words, I only learned last week suddenly worked their way up my throat like something I'd swallowed wrong. I called a lawyer from the bench in the lobby where the mail piles up and a plant tries to live. She picked up on the second ring, already sounding like she'd been waiting for the shoe to drop. "They were asking for a writ to seize," she said after I sent pictures. "Emergency. We'll argue status quo. Don't move it. Don't agree to it, anyone touching it. Bring the text from your mother, the notarized statement your sister gave you, the moving invoice. Wear shoes you can stand in 4 hours." Court didn't smell like justice. It smelled like old paper and metal warmed by palms. We were one of 30 names on a list the clerk slid into a plastic holder, like a take-out menu. My father was already there in a navy suit that made his neck look stiff. My mother had a scarf on even though it wasn't cold inside, she threaded and unthreaded the fringe like she was doing math. My sister sat 2 rows behind my father, angled so that if he turned his head to look, all he'd see was profile. She caught my eye once and pressed her lips together like sealing an envelope. When our case was called, my father stood too fast and spoke too soon. The judge, a woman with hair pulled back so tightly it made her look younger, not older, held up a hand and said, without looking at him, "Sir, wait until I ask a question before you answer it." He sat in a motion that was also a slump. Our lawyer laid things out in sentences that stacked just high enough to balance without wobbling: intent to gift, delivery, acceptance. She slid the printed text from my mother to the edge of the table as if she were feeding a shy animal. My father's lawyer, there was a man, I hadn't even seen him gather at my father's elbow like a storm cloud, talked about receipts from the 90s and heirlooms and how this was family property that had been on loan. He said on loan with air quotes you could hear. My sister didn't look at anyone while she raised her right hand. Her voice was soft and steady when she described the day we moved the piano, how our mother waved from the porch and told me to take the bench cushion too because it matched the wood. She held up the notarized statement. The judge peered, asked if this was her signature, if she'd seen my mother write the original text. Yes, she said. Yes. She swallowed between the words like she'd run a race. My father shifted, his knee knocking into the table in front of him so the pens rattled, the proud sound of wood betraying him for something that wasn't his. We didn't win, exactly. Courts don't do wins in the first 15 minutes. The judge denied the emergency writ and told them they could proceed like civilized people if they wanted a trial, but no one was to attempt self-help again. Instruments are not vehicles, she said, and I don't think she meant it as poetry, but it landed that way. She put it into the order: no removal, no interference, no one walks into anyone's apartment with a dolly or a locksmith. She told us to exchange documents, set a date for mediation, looked over her glasses as if to say, I would prefer you fix this in a room with chairs instead of in this one with a bench, and moved on to a landlord-tenant case where a woman in a cardigan wept into a tissue. Outside, the sky was aggressively blue. There was a guy on the courthouse steps playing Autumn Leaves on a saxophone in 4 colors of tarnish, and I gave him everything under 10 in my pocket because the way he leaned into the B-flat felt like permission to breathe. My mother caught my arm like it was a door that might swing shut without a stop. You made this ugly, she said in a voice that couldn't decide whether it was whispering or scolding. I thought for a second she was going to say something else, a different sentence entirely, but my father's lawyer called her name and she dropped my sleeve like it burned. I thought the adrenaline would come down when I got home. It didn't. I wiped the dust off the piano's fallboard with the sleeve of my sweater like that would remove the imprint of other people's hands reaching for it. I played scales like holding on to a rope, C to G to D, the way Merrick had shown me how to open my wrist without yanking my shoulder up into my ear. Somewhere in the middle my phone lit up with an email from the community center director with a subject line that made me laugh and then cry, "Do you teach small hands?" Their after-school art teacher's husband had gotten a job in another state, and they were losing her sooner than they'd planned. Would I consider a little musician's class twice a week? They'd pay me a stipend that would cover exactly a month of rent and 3 bags of rice. I said yes so quickly the cursor hadn't even blinked. The first day I watched 8 children introduce themselves by climbing onto the baby granite and squealing when their voices changed pitch. One girl with a braid so tight it could cut ropers used to take off her backpack like it was a parachute. A boy tapped every key at a volume that would have scared pigeons off the roof. I brought a bowl of dried beans and plastic Easter eggs and we made shakers. Merrick watched from the doorway with his mouth tilted in a smile that tried to remember how to be big. At the end, we pressed our palms flat onto the wood, left prints that vanished like footprints in a breeze. What's her name? Backpack test. She doesn't have one, I said before I could stop myself. You can call her whatever you want as long as you're kind. They argued over it with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for trees. The events manager from the wedding venue sent me the audio file she'd mentioned and I put it on while I scrubbed a pan that had given up a piece of onion to its char. It wasn't pristine, glasses clinked and someone at one point said, "Who is that?" Like it was part of the melody, but my hands did what they had done that night, and listening, I could feel where my left thumb had almost missed a low E when the waiter bumped the bench. Right near the end, there was a shimmer of laughter that wasn't a glass or a fork. My sister's laugh sits in a particular register the way some birds sit on exactly the same wire every day at dusk. It was there. I sent her the file without a message, and then my phone vibrated so long I thought it would jump off the table. I listened 3 times, she wrote. I didn't hear the room then. I hear it now. A minute later, I took the necklace back. 10 minutes after that, a picture arrived of a soft black case with silver latches sitting on my sister's kitchen counter. Guess what I traded it for, she wrote. I opened my door to my hallway, not sure what I was expecting, as if the thing itself might materialize, and then I laughed because of course it was ridiculous and perfect, a small field recorder with microphones like 2 curious eyes and a pair of studio headphones still in plastic. Bill says your lawyer will need invoices, she added. I told the store I was buying for you. Happy, something. Thursday nights turned into something like a steady heart. The broken wrist pianist healed enough to play left-hand repertoire that would make most people quit out of pure humility, but the hotel down the street, which smelled like starched curtains and citrus cleaner, picked me up for Saturdays. A man at a corner table cried during a Sadie piece and didn't wipe his face, just let the salt water do what it does. On my break, A woman slid a business card across the bar with a note written around the print and phone number. We run a program where musicians play in hospital lobbies, would you? I thought about antiseptic in those vinyl covered chairs and how sometimes music can unstick 10 minutes from the side of an hour when you think you can't stand another. I wrote back yes. Merrick showed up at the studio with a square of fake felt under his arm like contraband. He laid it under the pedals so the dance cadence jumps wouldn't shake screws loose. He used a tiny brush to dust out the action with a kind of concentration that makes you want to whisper. In Poland, he said, apropos of nothing, my uncle went to court once over a cow. The judge asked him, do you milk it? Then it is yours. He shrugged. America is different. But judges still know when someone has hands on a thing and when someone has hands on a receipt. 2 nights before mediation, my mother came to one of my hotel sets. I didn't see her at first. I almost missed her on purpose. She sat by a potted tree like she wanted to pretend she'd grown there. She wore the necklace she used to say was too much for weeknights, her hands folded so carefully they looked posed. I played loudly for 2 songs and quietly for 2, testing if pretending she wasn't there would make her not be. It didn't. On my last break, she stood and put something on the corner of the piano where chop marks from a long ago clumsy caterer had left little half moons. A napkin. A Polaroid tucked under a coffee ring. Me, age 8, on a bench with my feet not touching the floor, hair in pigtails that wouldn't behave, my mouth open in a laugh big enough to shove air out of a room. On the back, in my mother's slanted hand that always made grocery lists look like apologies, house was quieter without you, not better. By the time I looked up, she had turned into a woman in a gray coat walking through a revolving door. Mediation had oatmeal cookies no one ate and a man who kept calling my lawyer young lady until she looked him in the eye and said his first name with a calm that made the air drop 2 degrees. We sat in separate rooms, shoveled language across a hallway wide enough to land a small plane. My father said things I didn't hear because that's how these things work. My mother offered to let me keep the piano if I agreed to sell it back to them when I no longer needed it. My lawyer wrote on a yellow pad so quickly I swear smoke should have come from the pencil and then slid it over to me. Do you want a counter? What do you want? I thought about the midnight knock with the notarized paper, about a girl with a backpack heaving shakers like a captain, about a saxophone outside a courthouse and a napkin with 10 words that felt like a stone finally set down. I want them to stop trying to make me smaller, I said, which is not a legal term. On the pad she wrote, transfer of title acknowledged, no further claims, no contact regarding instrument, each party bears their own costs, mutual non-harassment. We sent it back like a ship with flags. They sent ours back with everything crossed out and a note that said, simply, return the piano. We didn't settle. Sometimes the lesson is that some rooms are not where the knot will be untied. We walked out into a corridor with a mural of trees painted across concrete and the smell of someone else's coffee. My sister texted before I hit the stairs. Dad just told me I embarrassed him today, she wrote. I told him I was tired of being his mirror. He said I sounded like you. I stood for a second looking at the green paint leaves and thinking about what it means to sound like yourself when someone hears you with ears that don't want to listen. The hospital lobby gig started the next morning at 10. People moved in clumps that made no sound, or in singles that made too much. I set up with a little recorder my sister had bought with melted down expectation and I played Claire de Lune because I'm a walking clake and because some clakes are anchors, not chains. An older man in a knit cap closed his eyes and rested his lips on his face the way people lean their heads on open windows of moving cars. A nurse did a tiny dance on her way past the information desk, small enough that if you blinked you'd miss it, huge enough to rearrange the air. When I finished, a woman in slippers and a robe that gaped a little at the chest leaned over the rail of the second floor and said, into the echo that turned her voice to a bell, thank you. I lifted a hand and she lifted hers back and the space between us felt like something measured not in fee, but in earned breath. That night my father left a message that was an advertisement for how well rage can be restrained. We would proceed to trial and he would pursue all remedies. He didn't mention my sister. He didn't mention my mother's napkin. He didn't mention the part where the judge told him to stop trying to haul a piano down a staircase by force of will. I placed the recorder where the lid catches lied and listened to my hospital lobby fingers, and my own ears. The little mics picked up the building's hum underneath me. The sound sat in the room like another person who had decided to stay. I don't know what a judge will do with us when all of this is lined up like people being picked for teams. I don't know if my mother will ever sit at my piano's bench and put her hands on her own lap without clenching. I don't know if my father will stand in a corner at one of my gigs again because he can't help it, because some part of him wants to measure my life against his and doesn't know how to stop. What I know is that new things keep arriving like notes I didn't expect, a little hand leaving a peanut butter fingerprint on the edge of a key and then wiping it off with exaggerated care, A work email that asked if I can learn a song from a 90s video game for a conference and me laughing into my sleeve and saying sure, why not? A man at a bar who doesn't ask my name, just says, "It felt like you forgave someone in the bridge." I am not ready to call any of this over. But the other night, when the building went to sleep and the radiator made that sigh that sounds like an old woman finding her chair, I put the Polaroid up on the wall next to the light switch. The little me with her feet in the air keeps laughing every time I turn the light on. When I sit down and press a key, the sound fills the inches between this fight and the life I am building, not like a wall but like a window I'm finally strong enough to keep open even when it rains.